The title of the talk today, as Darlene mentioned, is Making Room for Transferable Skills in Academic Classes. So I want to talk a little bit today about what transferable skills are, what that means. We'll go over that at kind of a cursory level. It's a fairly basic introduction to transferable skills. We'll talk a little bit about the skills gap, the purported skills gap at MUN and at universities and colleges kind of writ large across the country and even worldwide to a certain extent. I'll be talking about all of this in my capacity as Fusion's project lead, the project lead on the Fusion project here at Memorial, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we get going. And as well, when I'm finished with all of that preamble and all of the remarks that I have prepared, I'll turn things over to Dr. Dufour, who will talk a little bit about her own experience using a Fusion skill development module in her biology class, I think in the winter of 2025, but I'll leave Suzanne to talk about that in a little bit. So a little bit about me. As I've said, I'm the Fusion project lead here at CITL and at MUN, and I'm also by title an instructional design specialist. The doctor in my title is not in education, but in English. So I came to this job by kind of a circuitous route, I suppose. I've listed formerly and still sometimes here per course instructor in English, as well as copy editor and editor of higher education textbooks. So I found that as a developmental editor of higher education textbooks, I was doing basically what I'm doing now as an instructional designer, working with educators and academics to help them help their students learn better and more efficiently. And as a per course instructor in English, I found, as I'm sure a lot of you instructors who are listening to this find in first year classes and increasingly upper year classes too, all of these little issues and discrepancies that would pop up with regards to student participation in class or student ability to email me, or even students knowing that they could contact me after class hours, or how they would engage with me. And so a lot of my experience as a per course instructor in English, and particularly here at MUN in English 1090 critical reading and writing, feeds into some of the skill development work that I'm engaged with in the Fusion project. So my objectives for today are fourfold. First, we'll hopefully learn about the transferable skills and their role in post-secondary education, what transferable skills are, most importantly. We'll think about the place of transferable skills in some of our own classes. You can think about where you see some of these gaps, if you see some of these gaps, as I'm sure you do. I've gone around campus talking to people, and continually I get feedback from instructors saying, yes, these gaps are there, how do we address them? And I'm hopefully going to address some of that today. We'll learn about what Fusion is. Possibly around campus you've seen posters for this resource, but I'll talk about what it is more specifically here today, as well as talk about how it's currently being used at MUN. And we'll see how Fusion can be implemented in an academic course. Dr. Dufour will cover that. So I'd like to begin with what amounts to kind of a doubly rhetorical question, in that I'm sort of leading you somewhere by asking this, but also you're unable to respond because I haven't set up polling software as a possible response to it. But I'll ask you to consider this question anyway, which is, how many of you would happily revise your syllabi to accommodate the demands of your students' future employers? And I suspect that most people would be not so happy to do this. Possible exception of folks in business or engineering, I thought about this. I mean, to a certain extent, those disciplines in schools are seeking the end of student employment in ways that, say, English and philosophy are not quite. There's some discrepancy there. But I think across the board, folks are going to say, no, I would not be so happy to hand over total control of my syllabus and all of my academic freedom to my students' future employers, right? This might go without saying. If I were to revise this question slightly, pose a different and say hopefully less controversial question, the following with addenda, right? How many of you would like to see your students do any of the following? Hand in their assignments on time and request fewer extensions. Take responsibility to solve problems instead of waiting to be spoon-fed. Communicate with their classmates and with you more effectively. See the connections between your course content and their other courses, work effectively in teams, use technology skillfully to enhance their work, not just to avoid work, and pull together ideas from a range of sources and integrate them effectively and creatively in their writing and other assignments. I think if I were to pose this question to you, which I sort of am, then maybe I'm leading you towards a different response, which is that you might say, of course, we want our students to suit this set of character traits. This is in some ways a picture of kind of an ideal student, right? And so enter transferable skills, which is transferable skills are really a series of skills and abilities that can be applied across a variety of different contexts, be those contexts professional, academic, or life generally. We tend to think of transferable skills, and when I talk about fusion, which I will in a minute, I kind of, quote unquote, sell those skills as employability bent, employability based. And in point of fact, the model that the fusion modules are built on, Skills for Success, which the Government of Canada pulled together some years ago, is founded on employability principles. So the idea was that they polled a bunch of employer partners and said, look, what skills are you not seeing in your recent hires out of undergraduate classes, and even in some cases graduate classes, your first year hires, what are you missing and what would you like to see? And they polled a bunch of different employer partners and came up with the following result, this set of skills that would help these students fare better in their entry-level positions when they started out. So things like communication, creativity, problem solving, reading, digital skills, collaboration, adaptability, and so on. And these are all employability focused, but you can see some of the ways in which they're not just employability focused, where these are general enough. We sometimes refer to these as soft skills or foundational skills or human skills. As I say, when I talk to people about fusion, I sometimes couch them as employability skills. But what I'm going to be calling them here today, and what is probably a better phrase for them, is transferable skills, because they transfer across these different domains, professional, academic, and life. So the unfortunate, I think, academic assumption sometimes tends to look a little bit like this, right? That the staid and stately and attentive, careful work of academic writing, academic thought, is going to be ground down and replaced by a technical pathway, technical mill, something like this Fordist nightmare, right? Where all of the free academic work that we do goes away and everything is just in service of the employer. This shouldn't be how we look at things, but sometimes it is. A more accurate picture, though, probably looks like this, right? That these employability skills are not just serving some technical end, although that in itself should be of some benefit to that, and we're increasingly thinking about this sort of thing at universities across the country. But they're also serving the end of just academic work generally. You think about some of these skills, and these skills are crucial to academic success and to students in academic classes, things like adaptability and collaboration. So if I return now to that list that I showed you before, the characteristics of a quote-unquote ideal student, and keeping in mind that Skills for Success model that I showed you, you can see that each one of these traits corresponds to its own transferable skill. So if the student hands in their assignments on time and requests fewer extensions, they have the skill that is self-management, time organization. If they take responsibility to solve problems instead of waiting to be spoon-fed, this is problem solving. Communicate with their classmates and with you more effectively, this is collaboration or communication. Excuse me. See the connections between your course content and their other courses. This is problem solving again, also creativity. Working effectively in teams, obviously collaboration. Using technology skillfully corresponds with AI literacy, digital literacy. Especially AI literacy is important now. I won't get into any of that, but that could be its own, as it is, its own other CITL talk, a few of them at this point. And finally, pull together ideas from a range of sources and integrate them effectively and creatively in their writing and other assignments is problem solving, it's creativity, it's communication, right? So we can see how these skills sometimes called foundational skills or employability skills, transfer across different domains. And more specifically, as examples of academic skills, we might think about some of the things that we ask our students to do in classrooms, right? The things that we get them to do for grades. So here's a list of some of them, things that will appear on syllabi sometimes, right? You think about research or literature review. This involves problem solving. This involves AI literacy, depending on your comfort level as an instructor with using AI in your class. Analysis of written material involves problem solving. Writing involves any number of transferable skills, not least of which creativity, problem solving, communication. Presentations goes without saying. Time management involves adaptability, collaboration, and so on. So we can see that these are not simply employability skills, although sometimes this tends to be the way into this discussion because it's so important that students can find work when they're finished with their degree programs. But also these skills help them to find their footing while they're at university as well, and help them to do better in their classes, because these are the things we're asking them to do for grades. So the problem then with all of this is how we meet these benchmarks, right? If we're presuming that these are skills that students need to have, not just for their careers and their lives, but for their work here at the university, for grades, what do we do if these students don't know how to manage their time, they don't know how to work in groups, they don't know how to communicate effectively with their instructors? And anecdotally, it seems like students are simply less and less able to do these sorts of things. So my question for you on WebEx, I suppose, and you here in person as well, is how did you learn these things, right? I mean, if you think of yourself as fairly reasonably put together and that you're able to do this, that, and the other, you have communication skills and you can self-manage and you can collaborate reasonably well. You know, did anyone during your undergraduate degree or otherwise ever sit you down and say, well, here is how to think through these things and here is where to acquire these skills? No, the answer is we learned them on our own. We were just thrown in the deep end. So what we might do with our own students is sort of three things. The first is we might do what happened for us. We might leave them to their own devices. The pro to this is that it kind of builds a level of resiliency in the students. The con is that it seems in general not to be working, because if we're doing this, we kind of have been doing this, and the students are not able to acquire these transferable skills, or at least not able to articulate the skills that they do have. The second thing we might do is carve out a little bit of class time to discuss transferable skills, right? This lets students know what it is that they don't know. It lets them know that these skills exist and that they don't have them yet, or that they're not reflecting on the skills they do have yet. But it doesn't really go far enough because it's of limited duration. I mean, if you imagine taking an hour of class time to discuss skills, and then that's the end of it, this doesn't really help students continue to do the work of reflection on those skills, because these things require practice like anything. And it's not really enough to talk about them just one time. Excuse me. And so then the third thing we might do is have students work on transferable skills alongside their course material for an extended period of time. Right, the pro here is that students will spend more time reflecting on their transferable skills. They'll get that practice. The problem with this, though, is that it would be necessarily disconnected from the course itself, and that any course, be it undergraduate course or graduate course, is just not going to have the real estate, so-called, to devote to this kind of thing. I mean, any class only has so much energy to devote to learning electrical engineering, or to learning Chaucer, what have you. And we can only carve out so much class time for this kind of thing. So what is the response then to this transferable skills issue at university? Well, I propose that Fusion, which is the Future Skills Innovation Network, the project I'm a part of, is one such possible response to one such possible solution to this problem. Fusion is a suite of skill development modules organized around the Skills for Success model that I pointed out earlier that the Government of Canada developed. And it's organized in such a way that each skill development module wraps around an applied learning experience, which is to say, in many cases, a course, and for the purposes of this talk, wraps around a course and helps students develop their skills over a period of time without cutting into the necessary course content of that course. So this is not a new program. Some of you may have encountered it before. There was an earlier iteration in 2020 and 2021. It was grant funded through the Future Skills Center. And the current iteration is grant funded through Employment Social Development Canada. It is a program that's run not just at Memorial. So it's kind of experimental in the way that we're all taking these same skill development modules, but rolling them out at the following different universities. So it's us, but it's also Carleton, Concordia, University Saskatchewan, and University of Calgary. So the modules are as follows. I said they kind of roughly correspond to the Skills for Success model that the Government of Canada put out. They're pretty close, as you can see here. So some of them are one-to-one. There's an adaptability module. There's a collaboration module. There's a problem-solving module. Some of them are based loosely and thematically around the same concerns, things like innovation and constructive dialogue and self-management. But a student can take approximately 3 or 4 hours. That tends to be the baseline. Take about 3 or 4 hours to complete a single module. And each module is, importantly, divided into 3 separate phases. So the idea is the explore phase, the student takes the time to learn that skill. They learn what it means to collaborate, to work in groups on a group project, say. Then they take a short break, and then they return to the apply phase. They take what they learned in that collaboration module and they apply it in practice. So let's say you have a group work component of your own class. They now take what they learned about collaboration and they apply that in context. They reflect on the fact that they've now done this work and ask themselves, okay, what does that mean? And then they take another short break and they return to the final phase, which is the reflect phase, thinking through whether or not they have actually successfully acquired that collaboration skill and what it might look like to continue to develop that skill in the future. So the reflect phase, which is kind of the linchpin of this whole thing, allows students to continue to go back and reflect on the skill that they developed in the first place. Hopefully, paving the way to future learning and future consideration of these transferable skills. So a question that I often get, I talk to people about this, and I sometimes overlook simple questions that I get from instructors who are interested in using some of these modules in their own classes is, what do they look like? And I'll show you in a second. I'll take you through Brightspace and show you what the modules look like specifically. But I kind of characterize them sometimes as a slightly fancier PowerPoint. They're developed in a piece of software called Storyline Articulate 360. This just means that they are slide decks that are available in Brightspace, and they're set up on a Brightspace shell. But the slide decks are considerably more involved and a bit fancier than your standard PowerPoint slides. So while they do contain slides that are static text for students to work through, they also contain slides that are videos or slides that have an interactive component or clickable buttons. And every single module contains these self-assessment quizzes, both pre and post. So I mentioned that the modules were divided into explore, apply, and reflect phases. And in the explore phase, which is the first one, students are asked to self-report by answering 15 to 20 select an option questions, their own facility with that skill. So whether they think, I'm quite good at collaboration or I'm quite poor at collaboration. And then at the final phase, the reflect phase, students are asked to return to those same questions, having presumably taken the time to work through what it means to collaborate, and then re-respond to them and figure out, how accurate was my characterization of my skill level at collaboration. What we tend to find is that students fare quite a lot poorer the second time around than they did the first time around, which is not discouraging. I think it generally just means that students overestimated their abilities early on, and that in fact, they weren't so great at working collaboratively, and that they know now what they need to do in order to continue working on that skill. And this is the same that goes for any of the other skills listed there. And because I realized that it's not enough to just show you sort of stock PowerPoint bubble stills of this thing, I'll take you through now a short tour of the Brightspace shell where this is set up, so you can get a sense of what it is that Fusion looks like. So as I said, it's set up in a Brightspace shell. This is my own Fusion Brightspace shell. It's something that you can opt into. Any student on campus can avail of this resource, but there are two versions of it. One is what I call co-curricular, and any student can access this. And the other is curricular, and the curricular version is the one that I'm sort of talking about now, that wraps around courses and that gets put into courses as an additional piece of content. But what you're seeing now is the co-curricular version of the Brightspace shell that I have set up. So if this were your course, this would be your own course's homepage. We go into content. And alongside, you can see all the modules listed here. You'll notice there are 4 components for each module. The phases that I mentioned before: explore, apply, and reflect, as well as, in this case, the collaboration module's student workbook, which is a document that allows students to go in and record their reflections. So as they're working through the modules, they're prompted to do short written reflections on the skill that they've acquired or haven't acquired to whatever degree. And that tends to be the completion metric that instructors will use to mark down the fact that students actually have gone in and done this work in the first place. So we open the explore phase, which shows up hopefully in a separate window as a SCORM object. And down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little next icon that students will click in order to work through the slides. We can click through next, 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 until eventually you can't anymore. So some of these act as gates so that students can't just click, 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 and say that they've completed it. In this case, they're required to engage with every piece of content on the screen before moving forward. So this just means clicking on every bubble. The module explores the following topics. Click on each to learn more: assessing your skills, defining collaboration, collaborative planning, collaborative behaviors, and collaborative processes. This sort of works to slow students down as they work through the modules. The next one here is a video, and you can't click next until you've looked at the video.
In this module, started.
I'm not going to play that for you, but just to give you a sense of the fact that you can't move forward until you've watched the video content, or you can't move forward until you've clicked through the interactive components. And then we assess our starting point. So this is the explore phase part. As I said, the student is asked to rate by self-report how successfully they feel they've managed with this skill as of right now. So they get a suite of questions. In this case, there are 15 of these, and we answer them before we can move on. I participate actively and accept a fair share of group work. Let's say usually. I work skillfully on assigned tasks, and I complete them on time. Always. I give timely and constructive feedback to my team members in the appropriate format, usually, and so on. So each module starts out like this, asking students to rate their performance so far. And then, as I said, the final component of the module, the reflect phase, asks them to return to these same questions, having gone through and applied the skill in context, and re-rate themselves and see how well they've done. So I won't take you through any further because I don't want to walk through the entire thing, but there are moments of pause that require students to stop and do actual written reflections. So it's not just a quick working through of this thing. Part of the idea behind this is to have students actually take the time, and time and duration are really important components of this. some characteristics of the curricular version of Fusion, because I said there are these two separate versions going on, the co-curricular and the curricular. The curricular one being the one that operates in classes. Some characteristics are that the module is often, but not always, mandatory for students, as we'll see. So Dr. Dufour in her class had a sort of creative optional version of a module for students to work through. But often an instructor will embed a module within their class as a mandatory component of that class for a particular amount of the final grade. It usually ends up just being kind of a completion amount. So say 3 or 4 or 5% of the final course grade. The instructor sets the time frame on this. So you can absolutely front load this and have the module completed at the front of the class, or separate it out, as I kind of recommend folks do, is separate it out so the explore phase comes at the beginning and the reflect phase comes at the end of the class. The module is meant to wrap around the course entirely or an assignment in the course. So let's say you have a writing or research assignment. It might make sense to use the communication module or the AI literacy module. Or if you just want to wrap it around a first year course entirely, you might have students work through the self-management module. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about doing this. I wrote that there are approximately 1,300 students working through Fusion modules in their classes this term. That's now closer to 1,600. And I have instructors in sociology, biology, social work, HKR, business, engineering, and Arctic studies using these. And the interest has sort of blown up. So it's been about a year now, and I'm trying to get the word out about these. And people tend to be using them more and more and have been using them more and more. So this term, there's been quite a lot of uptake and interest in them. Excuse me. So what gets graded, as I've said, is the student workbook document generally, but not all the time. So this is the easiest completion metric for the Fusion module just because it's there, it's handy. Students write something out and those responses can be graded. I have rubrics that I can send along to people to give instructors who are unfamiliar maybe a better sense of how to go about marking this kind of thing. It's also possible to develop your own system of grading these. So you might have a longer written response or an essay response or even a quiz. It's possible to take the apply phase and have that as an in-class discussion session. So part of my job really is to work with you to decide how best to go about evaluating this, depending on what your need is, depending on what your syllabus looks like. So this is the instructional design component of my job, is that instructors can work with me to determine what is going to work best for them and especially what's going to work best for their students. If you are interested in using Fusion in your class, this is another question that I get is, okay, how do I access this? How do I use this resource? I sometimes forget that the questions are going to be so straightforward and I jump over this stuff. But there are kind of 4 steps that I've outlined here and they're fairly straightforward. So the first is to obviously check out the modules for yourself and decide whether you think they're worth your time or not. I hope you do. But you can auto-enroll in the Fusion Brightspace page I just showed you via this QR code. Or for the less tech savvy, you can just go to the website mun.ca/fusion, and there's a button on the front page there that enrolls you in the Brightspace shell as well. Once you've done that and you've decided it is worthwhile, I would like to put this in my course, you can email me, iang@mun.ca, to discuss how you'd like to go about evaluating it. I'm happy to meet up in person or chat on WebEx, whatever you want to do, to go over, whatever stock allotment of this you want to use, or whether you want to do a more detailed and interesting implementation. I'm happy to consider all options. Once we've discussed that, actually getting a module in your course is fairly simple. You go to my dashboard in Brightspace and the course site enrollment tool and give me access as an enhanced TA, and I can copy a module over within about an hour's time. It's a fairly quick and straightforward process. After that, you just sort of start using the module, and I'm here as a support person in case any issues show up. or in case you want to talk about how to go about evaluating these any further. So that is about it from me for transferable skills and fusion. But I will pass things over to Dr. Suzanne Dufour to talk a little bit about her own experience using a module in her marine biology class in winter of 2025 now. So I'll stop talking, and Dr. Dufour, I'll give things over to you.
Great, thank you, Ian. I'm going to start with a quick introduction on myself as well. I hope everyone can hear me first. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I can hear or see me. Yes, we're good. So I'm a professor in the Department of Biology. I've been in the department since 2009, so it's been a while. I've had an opportunity to teach at various levels from first to fourth year and graduate courses as well. And Biology 3711, Ian, if you can a bit more, is a course in which I decided to implement the fusion modules here. So this is a course, a third year course, Principles of Marine Biology. It's a very much an introductory level course, so it covers kind of the basics of marine biology, some concepts there, and some applications, human impacts, and things like that. The course is capped at 40 students. Next, please. So it is really a mix of students who take this course, and they're mostly third and fourth year students. Well, there'll be students in the course who are who are taking the marine biology program. So they may have already taken a lot of marine biology courses, and others who are taking this as an elective. So it's a bit of an eclectic mix. And my experience teaching this has brought me to kind of my more recent iterations of design of this course have been to include a lot of different types of course components because students are kind of looking for different things out of the course. And I like to let the students who maybe have more than an introductory level exposure to marine biology already maybe sink their teeth into something a little bit of their own interest. So they might be really interested in climate change in the Arctic and impacts on marine systems, or they might really like sharks. So so I kind of built in a mix of different course components. So there's discussions, there's assignments, there's projects, and they kind of decide what they want to do to get complete marks in the course. So next, I have designed this to be quite flexible in terms of assignment choice. So for example, a student could choose to do a longer term project in some topic of their interest, which we discuss, and we kind of give them a little bit of guidance, and they work on that over the semester. Or they may decide to do, for example, I give them a suite of assignments on a weekly basis, and I ask them to complete 7 out of 9. So there's quite a lot of flexibility there. Next. So why did I decide to incorporate fusion in a course? So my own personal decisions or the rationale behind why I decided to do this was that in this course in particular, my conversations with students have taught me or have gotten me to see that the students taking this are quite focused on the future. They're thinking about what they want to do after they graduate, whether that's careers or graduate school. So their minds are really there. So they're looking at kind of, how do I get there? What do I need to be successful? How do I make this happen? And at the same time, I think that students, for a lot of our undergraduate population and perhaps graduates as well, there can be a limited self-awareness in terms of these transferable skills. It's not something they necessarily think about. They're not necessarily aware of what skills they already have, because they will come to university with some of these skills to some extent, and they might know or recognize they need to build their communication skills. They might already know this, or they might, as Ian mentioned, kind of overestimate their abilities already. So I think this kind of taking a little bit of a break and thinking about this, reflecting on this is valuable. Next. Also, I have come to learn that there's a lot of resources on campus. So there's lots of career development resources or other opportunities that exist that do an excellent job to support students with this kind of development. But students may not necessarily know that they exist, or they don't take the time to avail of these resources or these different programs that exist around the more academic component of their degrees. So I felt like, well, this is a really interesting way to kind of add extra value to the course curriculum. To me, it was a matter of thinking, well, when I teach this, what are the things that I want students to get out of my course? What do I want them to keep with them as they move forward in their lives? And I thought, well, why not do something like this that maybe adds value, or maybe adds something that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten out of this course or out of their degrees. All right, next. So how I decided to do this is maybe not a typical way. So I had a conversation with Ian in early winter semester. And I'd already known about like the basics of Fusion. I heard about it. I knew about the modules. I knew this existed. I knew there was a curricular version of it, but I hadn't planned this as part of a syllabus until really mid-semester. So after sitting down with Ian and talking about this and looking at these modules more closely, I decided, well, since I have a lot of flexibility in this course already, why not pilot this to see how it might fit, how it might work, if there's uptake. So I kind of jumped in, but I made it an optional element of the course. I didn't want to kind of jump in 100%. I wanted to kind of pilot it. So I chose the adaptability module for this course. As adaptability skills are kind of multi-purpose, and I thought, well, they can at least get to know the modules, and then maybe if they see that this is something valuable, they might choose to complete some other modules on their own afterwards. So made this decision to make it an optional component of the course. I brought it up to the students. I believe it was the first week of March. I spoke to them about it. And the way that I treated it was as an optional activity that they could substitute for something that was already in the syllabus, worth 3% of the final grade. So they could substitute completing this module, which I would grade, for an assignment, one of those 7 out of 9 assignments, or a discussion item. So it was completely up to them if they chose to do it. And it was very easy to get it set up within my course shell. So the view here shows my course shell component of it. This is in the content tab. So as Ian mentioned, it's quite quick to get this added to your shell if you chose to do it. So again, I did this in March, and it popped up very quickly. So it was added as a course content. And I just created a little announcement to make sure that students were clear on how they could use this for marks in the course, and what my rationale was for that. It was added as a content piece here. I made a few little tweaks to the text that was the default text that was provided as part of the module here, just to make it fit with my course. I added an assignment folder. So that was obviously something I think most of us are doing in our courses. And this is where the students who chose to complete the module could upload their workbook, so that I then had access to grading it. I didn't make a formal change to my grades scheme. I simply asked them, okay, if you're doing this, do you want this to replace an assignment or a discussion, and then they told me which one, and I just kind of manually entered a grade after I'd completed that. And I gave them until the end of the semester to complete this. And also, I guess I should mention, I figured that the 3 to 4 hours that it takes them to complete a module, in my case, was really close to the time that it would take them to do one of my other assignments or discussion items. So I felt like it was broadly equivalent in terms of a time commitment. So I made that clear to them. Yeah, so I gave that a try. Next slide, Ian. And I'll tell you how this went. So out of the 40 students who were enrolled, in the end, I had 10 students complete it, which I was pretty pleased with. So in the adaptability module, so when they go through and complete this, what they're doing is reflecting on and applying to their own lives what's called the Bridges transition model. And this is not something I was personally aware of, but it's basically a framework that kind of walks the students through the processes or the psychology of helping individuals or groups manage unanticipated change. So how do we work through, how are we as individuals or how are groups dealing with change, and how can we best equip individuals or groups to deal with change? So that's what they were tasked to do while they completed this module. So they did this on their own. And then when I came to the assessment, I had asked Ian for his rubric, which was quite helpful. So this basically helped me look for them reflecting on what they learned going through this module, providing examples from their lived experience that made sense, and are they able to apply concepts from the module to their own experience? So I looked for I read through their written pieces, and it seemed to me like they took this seriously. They were, on the whole, doing quite well, and I felt like they did gain something out of this. So it wasn't apparent to me that they just kind of did this to get it done and get a couple marks. It looked like they were actually reflecting and applying what they were learning here. So at the end of this module, they also get to complete a survey. And as an instructor, I could see the results of their survey. So out of these 10 who completed the module, so 6 responded to the survey, and most agreed or strongly agreed that this was a useful exercise, essentially. So it helped them develop skills. They could apply these skills to real world situations. It supported their skill improvement, fostered development and learning, and that the instructions to completing this module were clear, the pacing was good. So on the whole, they seemed to like, or they were happy that they'd done this. And I will say they all did very well out of it. I felt like they deserved to get full marks for their efforts here. Okay, next. So what sorts of things students learned I thought was interesting. So they got to reflect on the importance of adaptability and flexibility, both in work or in the academic setting in school and in their personal life. So they were really kind of thinking very holistically about how they adapt to change. And so they were bringing up things like it's important to keep an open mind, to think about different possible solutions if you're faced with a problem that's unanticipated, being willing to learn, look at other people's perspectives. So it's really a lot about being open-minded, so not sort of shutting down and freezing when you're facing change. And then the skills that they could identify that helped them adapt to change included things like self-care, time management, effective communication, building support networks. So all things that they were able to then identify and put a name to. So say, okay, I do have skills for adaptability. I can point out that I have effective time management skills, and this is a tool that I use to help me deal with change. So I just pulled a few of the comments that they made here. So to illustrate that. So this curriculum has helped me learn these skills, as I never took the time to truly think about these things before and realize their importance. So again, it's this kind of, we don't speak about these skills, we don't bring up why they're important. So this is a way to help them reflect on it. Another student said, in future work, I'll be ready to adjust to any new policies or systems and continue to improve my communication with team members. So recognizing that communication piece there was a skill that needed a bit more work. And then again, about articulating skills. I can communicate these skills to employers by bringing them up in interviews and including them in my resume. So things that they probably before this module would not have thought would be valuable skills that they have learned throughout their university experience here that bring them an extra value. Okay, next, please. So just to kind of wrap up here, final thoughts. I felt that these modules, or my implementation of that adaptability module was very easy. As I mentioned, I was able to kind of pilot this halfway through a semester. It was very little stress, and I felt it had added value. I felt that the students who completed it recognized that and appreciated having that opportunity. Now, there was some grading required, so just to be clear, it's not, if you're building that into your curriculum and you are going to give them grades, you do have to read through their work. But I think one of the advantages is that this could, like if you're not willing or interested in kind of formally making this a required component of a course, it could be used for students who are looking for bonus marks or replacement marks for another activity. So lots of opportunities on different ways to use this. Now, I didn't wrap it really around the course content. It was kind of a standalone, not applied to marine biology. But now that I've had this pilot experience, I could see how I could now wrap it around marine biology content. And I think what I'd like to do in the future is, after they've kind of reflected on how they adapt to change, these different kind of principles and different strategies to helping support change, it could be used as an exercise for them to think about, okay, in marine biology, if there's a community that's now having to deal with a new a change. So for example, a marine conservation area is implemented, and that means there's going to be a fisheries closure. Okay, so think about these principles and how you could support change in that community to help them adapt to that change. So I think there could be an interesting activity built around that. And so those are things that I think the way that these modules are designed, the kind of content that you learn, you could apply this to different types of courses. I didn't quite see it when I was first experiencing the module, but I'm seeing now how this could work. And then another interesting component is that if we start to think a little bit more broader than implementing these in a single course, we could think about building a set of these as being introduced in different courses of a degree. So we've started to do this in the Department of Biology. So I introduced the modules, or I brought this up at a department meeting as a kind of an interesting, suite of modules that people might want to put into their courses. And then this semester, we've started to have a more formal kind of a plan put into place so that different courses start to build in different modules so that students, as they go through their degree, will be developing a suite of complementary skills. So that's something that could be interesting for others to think about. If anyone is interested in chatting more, I'm happy to chat with anyone about this, or certainly Ian's getting a lot more experience with different units implementing this in different courses. So that's all I'll say for now, and I think we can open this to any questions, or if anyone wants to put this up in chat, we can take those as well. So thanks for listening. I hope this was informative and helpful.
Suzanne's right. There's been some uptake in biology, so right now it's running in, I forget the numerical placements, but intro biology and intro genetics, and in the summer past in an entomology course. I wouldn't put words in the instructor's mouth, but I think with great success, or reasonable success. So you all in biology have been sort of at the vanguard of this stuff, which is really cool. I didn't expect to have so much implementation within a single discipline. It's been kind of a mixed bag and across the board. And when I started doing this job, I really thought I would be able to predict where certain modules would land, and I've been totally off the mark. It turns out that it's just, it will land wherever people are interested in trying some new pedagogical strategy. And that's about the end of it. Just whoever wants to try something new, who feels that their syllabus is a bit stale, recognizes this as an issue, and will just give it a go. And so it tends to be non-disciplinarily specific. It sort of lives everywhere and anywhere at the moment. And the non-curricular version, the opt-in version of Fusion, I had thought, early undergraduate students will make great use of this resource. And it's been quite a lot of graduate students, which is something I didn't see coming, because we think graduate students have it all together, I guess. I guess not.
Yeah, I heard a lot of interest, or some interest, at least from biology faculty as well, to kind of introduce their graduate students to this as well. No, certainly there's skills. I think something for all of us in these modules, really.
A quick question, Dr. Dufour, regarding uptake and participation and interest. Any thoughts on how you could get more participation? For example, would you consider making this a mandatory part of your course, or do you think that keeping it voluntary is the best approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I like things to be very flexible in this course. So it was sort of a natural decision, just in terms of, the way I designed this course to begin with. But I see value in making it required as well. And I think if I were to build it around something like having a class discussion afterwards, then it would need to be mandatory. And I believe Ian can maybe mention the other courses where they do make it mandatory before a particular activity in a curriculum. So I think there's value depending on kind of what you want to do with it, either way.
Yeah, that has been kind of a mixed bag. So I've had a couple instructors who have done the optional thing, have included this as something that students can do after the fact for bonus credit. And I've had some people include it and wrap it around an assignment if there's, as I said, something like a group project, that they'll have students first do the explore phase and then the apply phase when it comes time to do the actual project, and then later in the term return to it and do the reflect phase. The question, I think.
I just want to let you know that I think we're ready for the lady to ask questions.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me now without the echo?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation and how you've incorporated this in biology. I teach industrial chemistry at the Granville campus, and clearly the name itself says that this is all industrially focused. There's a lot of transferable skills that we talk about. And one of the things that I hear a lot from my students is that they're very concerned about AI replacing them in many ways. and they don't know what transferable skills could then help them compete against AI. It's funny, although we do talk about the fact that they're not going to be replaced by AI, but something they would need to know is how AI works, and that would give them a competitive edge. But what is it that they need to do in this so that they are still, effectively able to put this across in an interview, on their resume, in their skills? How do you navigate those questions around the more emerging technologies that needs their skills beyond just management and time? Because there are now apps that they will use, but how do they integrate these two together? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I can try my best to. I would say to start, I don't have an answer to this question because it's an increasingly difficult question to ask, and it's funny that everything sort of comes back to AI. The Fusion program has an AI literacy module, which is sort of an introduction to the kinds of things that I'm sure your students who are concerned about AI are maybe already a little bit familiar with. But I mean, I think I would return to the emphasis on humans. So insofar as transferable skills also go by other names like employability skills and human skills. So some of these quote unquote human skills are maybe the kinds of things that we'll see a need for more and more, honestly, as people talk about how the AI pendulum is going to swing back the other way, which I'm not going to prognosticate about this all day. But I mean, I think there will be some swing back in the other direction, and critical thinking and writing. So communication is going to be huge. Collaboration, constructive dialogue, the ability to work with other human beings is going to be huge. I could be way off, and it'll be the exact horrendous opposite of that. But I would like to think that that these human skills will still be of benefit. And working through these modules is going to give students the ability to articulate the fact that they know how to do these to employers and on resumes and so forth. Yeah, thanks for your question.
I have one more question. I know we're at time, but there is a question in the chat that I just wanted to, maybe it's a quick answer. For the co-curricular version, is there a way to have this connected to more Memorial's online record of experience?
Yeah, so it is connected to Memorial's online record of experience. So if you complete it, and you can go in, and it's an entry on more. I think it exists as a single entry, and I'm still in back and forth with the person in charge of more to sort it out so that each module has its own entry. But right now, if you complete a module, then you can go in and record that on more. Yes.